welcome. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and this is a very special episode of Put It Together, coming to you on a weekday. And the reason we're doing this is I wanted to bring a special subject and topic to the table, something that we don't get to talk about very often. For those of you that have watched the show for a long time, pardon me, before I go in there, I want to welcome everybody watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. For those of you watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, do us a favor. Would you mind sharing this show that others can watch it along with you? If you're watching us on YouTube, will you scroll down, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell? It'll let you know every time there's a new episode on the air, especially on YouTube, where you can go and watch all the shows we have. Just go over there and watch them out. And remember, we have Christian and Daniel show, the Card Devo, Put It Together, plus other shows that we're preparing for you guys. Again, coming today, we are talking about a topic that we don't normally get to talk about. For those of you that have been following the show for a long time and following me in my career, know that I've been HIV positive for over 21 years. And for those of you that don't know, I am 51 years old, so I'm going to hit that senior bracket pretty soon, and I want to make sure that I'm prepared, knowledgeable, and know where to go when the moment comes. We know that, especially here in Southern California, there is a large group of seniors, and we want to make sure that anybody who is senior in HIV knows where to go for services, what services are available, and what agencies are there to help you out. To start off today, let me read your bio. My first guest, she is a good friend. We are both, for those of you, I am board member at Radiant Health Centers, and I've talked about this on the show, and they've been on the show before, but let me read you her bio. Martha P. Gomez has worked in the nonprofit most of her life. Martha's own life experiences as trans, non-binary person continue to drive her passion to do the work of creating programming for the LGBTQ plus community. Martha has been with Radiant Health Centers for 7 years and has been firsthand the negative effect, and has seen firsthand the negative effect of stigma in the HIV/AIDS community. Working with the Reconnect at Radiant program, they have also seen the impact of stigma when it comes to the older adult community. Martha hopes to continue working and creating spaces where all our intersections can thrive. And with that, let me bring Martha into the stage. Hey, Martha.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing really good today.
Martha and I have collaborated and worked together on several stuff, and so it's always a pleasure getting to work with you and talking to you. 7 years at Radiant Health Centers, but you've been doing nonprofit for way longer than that. For the people that don't know all of your story, what was the thing that first brought you into nonprofits?
A ticket. I actually got a ticket and had to do my community service because, when you're young and broke, you can't afford. And then I got, paired up with a nonprofit to do my community service hours and just, fell in love with doing work for others. So that's kind of how my life ended up in the nonprofit section.
Well, it's interesting how things just kind of, the universe has a way of just putting us where we're supposed to be, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
How has, since we're talking about HIV and aging today, from the first time you started working with the older generations, what has changed? What have you seen? Trends, services, people approaching for services?
Well, I'll say, my career really was a lot with children before I joined Radiant. I've volunteered for a long time in different LGBTQ places, but the truth is that, it wasn't my primary focus. This was my first ability to work with the community. And so I knew, statistically speaking, HIV does affect gay men, MSM more predominantly than others. So I knew that I would be working within the community to some sort of degree. It's just coming on board and kind of seeing, really understanding my own stigmas, my own stereotypes, and seeing that, HIV was something that was everywhere. And I think that was one of my self-reflection kind of opportunities of seeing, like, here I am in the community, and even I kind of had my own stereotypes that I would only be working with, gay men, and really, like, to be perfectly blunt, like that's what I thought. And then just seeing the vast, from young people, older people, cisgender, straight, it's really is exactly what we teach, that HIV can affect anyone. um, and I've been there 7 years, so kind of just like your own experience, some of the clients who I met and kind of started building rapport with, they now have gotten to the older age community. They now are, have been living with HIV much longer. So those are things that continue to kind of evolve, the longer I work there, just seeing how people medication, even though medications are great, amazing right now, the reality is that most of those long-term survivors started on regimens that were not as friendly to their bodies.
I'll raise my hand on that. I remember when I was first diagnosed back in 2000, taking like 40 pills a day, and half of those were just for HIV, just to make sure that everything was. Now I'm down to one pill a day, which is amazing. But then again, I was 29 when I was first diagnosed, and now I'm 51. So it's. I think back then also we weren't expected to live that long. It was just, we're going to maintain you until the virus takes over. So your thoughts are, I think, are legit for many of us who work in the nonprofit. Um, and a lot of us walked into working in the nonprofit with that certain idea that it's like, we're only going to work with this community. And we forget that there's a whole lot more out there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, just fun fact, Radiant Health Centers initially was established, for those who don't know, we were known as AIDS Services Foundation, Orange County. And really the purpose, and, we say this a lot, is our purpose was to help people die with dignity. And so that kind of was our mission. It wasn't so much of how do we make their lives better. It was, a lot of people who were isolated because their family disowned them, for being positive. So you look how the mission has changed from helping people die with dignity to now helping people live and thrive, as they are.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our second guest today. Let me read you a little bit about Sarah Kim. Sarah Kim is the clinical supervisor for the Reconnect program at the Council on Aging Southern California. She has worked with older adults for over 9 years in her current capacity, providing therapy for those suffering from depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders, and overseeing the clinical team of the program. Sarah's previous experience include clinical case management, crisis intervention, and psychiatric clinical social work at Kaiser Permanente and College Hospital. She has expertise delivering cognitive behavioral therapy, person-centered therapy, solution-focused therapy, and motivational interviewing treatment modalities. Sarah holds a master's degree in social work from California State University of Long Beach and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Syracuse University. Let's go ahead and bring her out here. Sarah Kim, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here today.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. A little nervous, but I'm hanging in there.
Don't fear. Don't fear. We got you here. We're going to hold your hand. Is this your first interview?
Yeah, it's actually my first podcast ever.
Yes, I love welcoming people into. Well, welcome to the world of podcasting and live streaming, Sarah Kim. Tell us a little bit more about what you do specifically, and your position.
Sure. So I work for the Reconnect program under the Council on Aging Southern California. What we do is we provide services to older adults 60 and over in the Orange County community in California. We do in-home case management services to address the needs that the older adults have, and this could be, economic or social concerns, various health conditions, mental health related. We also I provide therapy services, and also oversee the case management, the therapy team in the community.
There, as we were just talking with Martha, there is this belief, and 40 years later in HIV, it's still a myth. HIV is a gay man's diagnosis, let's put it that way. Not true. Can you tell? I guess what I'm trying to get to is like, what are some of the myths that you hear or thoughts that people have about HIV and the senior uh, and people, older people?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, there's a myth that it is only among gay men, and what I've seen is that, it is prevalent among any population, and we are here to really just kind of break the stigma. And this is why we partner with the Radiant Health Centers to really outreach to that community. As a agency ourselves, it's been really challenging to break in through. And I'm actually going to have like Martha speak to this because I think she's more of the expert in this arena.
Um, Go ahead, Martha.
No, I think, yeah, I can speak to that, but I think that, just in general, sometimes misconceptions that people may have just with like, even with older adults, I think that there are also, just like with the HIV community, some misconceptions that people assume that maybe all older adults are bedridden. I know that that was one of the things like we just assumed. So maybe Sarah can speak to that, like just what are misconceptions on working with the older population. What do people assume the older person looks like?
Gotcha. Well, let's slide over a little bit because as we get older, and not just HIV, because I want to make sure that we talk on the show not just about the HIV because we can do a whole other show on that. But as we get older, and we were joking around a little bit before the show started that I'm 51, I'll be 55 before you know it. And what are in this day and age, we would think, well, seniors have it easier. Like there's retirement homes, there's all kinds of places where they can go, there's all kinds of services. Um, what are some of the topics or things that get brought up as people get older that either one of you have encountered or hear about?
Sure. So, actually, there is a misconception that, a lot of older adults have retirement plan and they're, kind of living a fulfilled life, right? Because that would be the end goal for all of us, and that would be an ideal time. But oftentimes, a lot of our seniors are actually, they did not plan so well for their future, and those are the population that we're focusing on. So, older adults right now, the population is expected to double by 2040, and oftentimes this population is actually forgotten. We're primarily focused more on like funding children, and but there's so many issues that these older adults face, such as they become older and they start losing families. They may experience grief, physical disabilities, loss of mobility, any illnesses that may come into play as they get older and they age. Um, and I think it is imperative as a community to really address these needs and to aid them to facilitate a successful, healthy aging.
Right. And I'll add to Sarah, I think, you know, aging in general, and the truth is that, like I said, my history or my career has been with younger people, children really. So learning what the older community and really understanding and then taking that step further, and that's um, great to see like agencies like Council on Aging reach out to partnerships with like other community partners, because we may not understand, or we didn't know as much what the older community needs were, but really learning that and then really applying the focus of what does it mean for an LGBTQ person to be an older adult. And we talk about isolation in the older adult community in general, but then you add that people who have lost their family because of coming out, people who need to go back in the closet to access those community resources, those retirement homes that maybe are not as friendly. So it we thank Council on Aging every day, because they teach us so much about the specialty of older adult, and then we can apply that filter of well, how does that extend? Sarah has a lot of expertise with like mental health in the older community, and then adding that degree of mental health and an LGBTQ identified person. So they intersection so smoothly that sometimes we forget, in doing our assessment, how the impact of having grown up in a generation where being out was not okay, where maybe you are seeking services, but do you really tell the doctor who you are when they say, are you sexually active? Which is another piece that doesn't get assessed as much when you're older adult, because the assumption is old people don't have sex. I mean, that's one of those misconceptions,
What?
and it's actually one of the highest STD
What?
demographic. So, people are out there living in communities having multiple sex partners. And so it's, reminding ourselves like we still have to have those conversations. And these are people who didn't grow up maybe in the condom era, a lot of free love in the 70s and 60s, and, baby boomers making babies often, it's kind of intertwining all of that and adding that filter of how does that apply to a community when they are gay, when they are lesbian, when they maybe lost their partner due to the AIDS crisis. How do all of those things get interpreted, in our community more specifically as well?
Got you. Let me go back a couple of steps, because I think as we're talking, even I'm a little like, okay, how? First of all, is there a political correct term? Like, do we say seniors? Do we say older folks? Like, what is? How do we refer to them? What is a culturally sensitive way to refer to people in that age group?
I've heard older adults. That's how I focus it. But people don't like the word senior because there's a negative connotation. It just means you're aging and getting old. And so when I meet someone, I don't even refer them to an older adult. I mean, we just have to have an identifier, which makes it easier for people to compartmentalize. But yeah, I mean, what do you refer to, Martha, when it comes to the population?
I think for the most part, older adult is kind of what the general. I think when we say seniors, we think of our abuelitas, already much older. And I have this discussion with my daughter because I'm not at the senior age yet, but I've already am identifying with my parents somehow, and having the need for her to read me the labels because I can no longer read them. So I'm on my way. But it's those things. I think that the younger we are, the more old is kind of younger. So I think older adults, just in general, is the most comfortable way to say it. But yeah, because seniors, I think most people think like seniors, like really old, just kind of on their end life.
And is there, like, for instance, we have a teenager group, like we know when you're a teenager, like, is there an age, like, is there technically an age where you bump into the senior group, the older group?
I think it's pretty subjective, but as a program with us, we identify people who are 60 and over to be senior, to be older adults.
But I still have about 10 years to go. Good.
5 years, yeah.
Yeah. Because we start to think. I mean, yes, for anybody out there who's like, age is just a number. Yes, of course, it's just a number, and you're only as old as you feel. But when it comes to services and groups and numbers and demographics, because we are talking about agencies, and there is numbers and groups and quotas that we have to meet. So 60 seems to be the age now. Although more people, I know such vital and strong people who are 60, 65, 70 years old, but just for number purposes, for anybody out there, we're not lumping you in, but if you, just so you know that for services, if you're over the age of 60, you can start applying for some of these services and seek out some of the things. Is there, and I'm going to play dumb for some of these questions for both of you, is there a difference in the way people seek services when they're in the straight community, heterosexual community, versus gay community? Would they have children or not children? I would think, and this is my innocent thinking, that somebody who is married, straight person might have different needs from somebody who's gay or lesbian. Is that correct or incorrect?
So the answer is yes and no. And I think, of course, there are specialty needs. Like I said, I think one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle that we continue to try to address is that many people do closet themselves again as they get older, especially after they lose their partner. A lot of times they just will identify and will answer questions as a person. We see a lot of the avoidance of answering. So you may ask, like, were you married before? And they may just say yes and not divulge much more. They may they may answer like, do you have any children? And they say no, but they don't actually divulge much more, like, you know uh, because remember, adoption, especially back for the older adult community, was not as much of an option as it is now. Or so sometimes I think it's that a lot of people will recloset themselves. So generally speaking, just like with any other community, I think that the overall needs are very similar, in regards to, people are looking for financial stability. They're looking for affordable housing. They're looking for mental health support. They're looking for grief support. As we get older, the amount of people around us that are dying does increase. That's just, unfortunately a fact. So, dealing with grief, so social support services, and we saw that like skyrocket even more during COVID. And, we've seen the effect of like social isolation on our older adult community. And then you're adding, the LGBTQ community, who maybe has an extra layer. So a lot of the needs are universal to older adults. And then sometimes, yeah, social support, like an older adult LGBTQ person would absolutely love to go to any group that, would invite them. But sometimes having an LGBT group makes it just a little bit easier to talk about some of those things, about maybe losing their partner and being able to identify their partner as, their husband, and not having to just say, my spouse died, my roommate died.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the roommate, right?
Yeah. Sarah, Martha brought up a good point, because we can't ignore, and we can't. It seems like a regular topic in every one of the shows that I do. COVID, COVID, and the older generations. Um, how has that impacted and
Impacted.
changed? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, since the pandemic hit, we've noticed that, the lack of increased food and transportation and financial insecurity were the main primary ones, as well as like limited and inadequate primary healthcare services, because a lot of the doctors and appointment, they were not allowing the participants to go in to see them at the hospital unless it was like a dire need. And due to their lack of technology and training, or the lack of equipment, that's been a huge barrier for this population. um, as well as not having experiencing caregiver burnout. Maybe before they were caring for their needing they were receiving help, caring for their spouse, their loved ones. However, as the pandemic hit, people were trying to limit themselves, not get themselves out. So people were experiencing caregiver burnout. And the biggest thing, as Martha mentioned, was really the isolation and the exacerbation of mental health illnesses such as depression, anxiety, unresolved grief. A lot of people experience so many losses during this time. Um, Also, there was a skyrocket of even elder and financial abuse among the seniors.
Oh,
They
wow.
were in a vulnerable state, and people were calling and like scamming them, asking them to transfer them money. Otherwise, they were not going to have access to basic needs, right? Maybe their Edison bill was going to be shut off, and they needed to pay a certain portion, and asking people to wire money. And people were in a panic state during this time. So people were falling into these scams. So we were going out and addressing these needs and helping the seniors really mitigate through these issues.
That's really interesting you talk about that, because um, fear. Um, none of us were prepared for COVID. Nobody knew. I mean, the day before we were all planning, we all had plans and things to do, and all of a sudden we're all locked down. And if you're a senior that's already depending on people to help you, to guide you, to take you, bring you, whatever, and all of a sudden that's shut down, that has to create a whole level of stress that for somebody who's able to move around isn't there. Does that make sense?
Right, right. And it was also on a bright note, it was actually a good a benefit to the community in that, seniors are always isolated, have been isolated for so long, right? Maybe due to lack of mobility, lack of transportation. And it was a wake up call to all of us in different age groups, right? And the silver lining in all of this is that, people, we were able to somewhat reduce a level of stigma. People were not wanting to access services in mental health, receiving therapy in the past. However, the pandemic has exacerbated these issues about mental health and brought more awareness because people were becoming more depressed and anxious because they were stuck at home. And as a result, the silver lining I said is that, now these older adults are recognizing, hey, this is happening to everybody. People are, and people start to normalize mental health a bit more. Um, and as a result, we were able to, again, reduce the stigma, and people were seeking out more services and help. Whereas before we were constantly just educating the participants in the older adult community and the community at large to really reduce the stigma.
It's it is really interesting because I know that I've watched in the news and read articles where scammers were targeting the older generation just because they weren't aware of it. Or it's interesting that all these years later we're still dealing with email scams and people still fall for it. One thing that I thought about as I was prepping for the show was dementia, Alzheimer's. How does that, when we're in a lockdown and people who are just starting to show signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, how were y'all able to treat them, supply services for them? Were they aware that they needed these services? Does that make sense?
This is very interesting, actually. You bring that up now. This actually brought more awareness, and there were more increase in the diagnosis of dementia because before, maybe they are living with their children, and their children only, would see them during the day, like before they go to work and after they return. But now they were like stuck at home, seeing their parents' behaviors like throughout the day, and they started noticing, hey, mom is a little more forgetful. She is like forgetting to maybe turn off the stove during the day or and it just brought more light into this. So people started accessing services like us and also getting, their parents or their family or a friend or neighbor to doctors to get diagnosis of dementia and getting and seeking treatment as a result. So we've been really connecting them to Alzheimer's Association or different community resources, getting them connected to memory test screening resources on the community, getting them the diagnosis so that they can get the proper treatment that they need. And this could mean, connecting them to, a neurologist for medication or getting them connected to like an adult day healthcare to receive, some socialization and for them to access like brain games and different activities so that they could slow down the level of dementia. Yeah.
That's really interesting. As far as the LGBT community, Martha, I know, and for everybody watching, I know some of these questions sound dumb, but they run in my head, and I this is the perfect time to ask them and answer them. Um, do mental health issues, are they stronger or in the LGBTQ community, or are we the same? Everybody is just the same when it comes to the mental problems.
Well, I think statistically speaking, if we just look at statistics, at data, um, those of us in the LGBTQ community are at higher rate to have a mental health diagnosis. Is that because we're more willing to engage in services? Yes and no. You know, I think that everybody is at a risk. I talk about mental health very congruently to like physical health, and the conversations we have with with our participants are very mindful of, if you have a pain in your knee, you're going to go see a doctor and not even question, like you're not going to sit back. Again, addressing more the older adult community, a large population that we serve is, the Latinx community. And then there's that. So when they're older adults, right? Then they're Hispanic, Latinx, and then they're, all of these extra layers. And the truth is we grew up hearing like, therapy is para los locos. So, only crazy people go see a therapist. So, the whole stigma of mental health generationally, and then that isolation or that, losing family because of, coming out. So, it's just, at the end of the day, I think a good mental health therapist is going to really assess all of your needs and really see you as a whole person. And really the LGBTQ piece is really just a piece of who you are. I mean, there probably are additional traumas because of maybe that piece of the puzzle, but the truth is that, we all are at risk of, loss, of grief. We all are at risk of isolation, depression, anxiety, especially with COVID. We all are at risk of, just generational genetic predisposition to some mental health illnesses. And so I think that at the end of the day, all of us could benefit from mental health services. I mean, I'll self-disclose. I see a therapist myself, and it's just, the reality is, we're all human. And I think that caring for yourself means, caring for yourself holistically, and it's the whole person,
Absolutely.
not just, my body, which, I also follow your taco diet. So, I'm going to start growing soon. But it's that it's really, assessing when, things go bad, and sometimes you need that extra support and have a sounding ear, and I think that we do have to kind of think about, yes, we may have a partner, yes, we may have friends, but sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who doesn't know you as well, but knows you better than, so like a therapist, someone who you can kind of divulge things like that to.
Just like how we treat diabetes, right? We would go to the doctor and get prescribed insulin, metformin, and we take it. And just like, we take care of our physical health, it's very, very important that we also focus on our mental health. Because when our mental health is jeopardized, everything kind of crumbles down, your physical health, your support system. And yeah, just like as Martha mentioned, people are oftentimes really afraid or they don't want to open up to others. But processing your feelings and being able to just kind of let out all the things that you've been like bottling up for so long could be so liberating. And yeah, and I just really hope that if somebody is out there, having a difficult time or hard time, everything is accessible now. So much easier than before as a result of COVID. Now, telehealth, everybody is seeking, now you could go on Zoom or just a quick link and you're able to access that.
Yeah, and then I'll tell everybody that I have a therapist through Radiant Health Centers, and we see each other every 2 weeks. One of the wonderful things about virtual is that I'm on my couch talking to my therapist. So if at the end of the therapy session I am bawling my eyes out, I'm already home. I can relax.
Your
So let me tell you,
element.
for those of you that doubt that virtual therapy works, it's really calming. I do like to see my therapist in person, but it's very relaxing. One of the things that people don't know about Orange County, California, is that we're so diverse. People have this image from television and movies that Orange County, California is a predominantly white area. No, as you can see here today, we got all colors here. We do have a diversity, and with diversity comes shame, stigma, and silence in the communities when it comes to aging and mental health, HIV, and other conditions. How does your agencies, or how do y'all push through that silence that we all have? I mean, I think anybody who's of color, any person of color has in their background, some religious or cultural norms or social norms that we fight with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, so we do a whole person assessment. So with the Reconnect program, you're assessing the whole person. So we ask about their spirituality. We ask about their hobbies. We ask about their support systems. We ask about their housing. We ask about their background, so we really want to get a sense of the whole person, um, to make sure that we are treating them individually, because just because someone is, maybe lives in South County doesn't mean that they are well off. It just could be that maybe they had access to a friend who lets them live with them, or just because someone lives in Santa Ana, we don't assume that they are of, lower socioeconomic, because it could just be that that's where they grew up and they own 7 houses that they rent out. So,
Right.
it's really kind of asking a lot of those questions, the background questions, to really get to know the participant. We develop an ISP with them, so their own service plan is what are their goals, and we have that conversation with them, like, what are your goals? Because, again, I think one of the things, even with social work or mental health, is that, sometimes you make or create some ideas of things that someone might need, but the reality is that just because I think you need housing doesn't mean that you need housing at the moment, because maybe you want to prioritize job search, which, older people still need sometimes to find jobs. Maybe they want to prioritize getting a car or their transportation. So, it's really listening and having those open conversations with our participants to know where are they. And again, keeping some of those things, so that it doesn't hurt. One of the things I think we kind of keep coming back to is that sometimes people don't want to share their mental health, um, the struggles, their depression, their anxiety, especially when you're only starting to build rapport with someone. They may not be as open. So it's maybe, leaving that mental health on their care plan, especially if when you're talking, you hear things that maybe you should continue monitoring to make sure, and asking questions, once you build that rapport. Because the truth is, we all know, if I have a cold call, someone's calling to help me, or even if I'm seeking the services, and the first thing they ask is like, how's your mental health? I probably am not going to be 1,000% truthful with them. So we know that. I mean, we understand that. And it's just kind of like, okay, let's keep that on their care plan, and let's continue to monitor and assess once we've built that rapport with them.
Gotcha.
Right. And really, the benefit of the program is that we're actually able to see the person in their environment. And that really says a lot about the person. And we could go out and making sure that they're living in a conducive and a safe environment as well. And just as Martha mentioned, really seeing the person where they're at and meeting them where they are, and just kind of taking it slow, of their needs, and having them come up with their goals and their solutions, and
I think one of
assisting
the
them through
things,
the process,
yeah,
and
thank
just
you.
supporting them. We are just there to support them with what they want, right? Because the end goal really is so that these older adults they're able to sustain their independence for as long as possible, right? With dignity.
And that's one of the things I like to put myself in the hot seat, because I think that's how we can connect with people watching. As I'm getting older, and there are some health conditions that don't necessarily stop me, but do slow me down once in a while. Even though I'm taking my medications and I'm HIV positive and I'm healthy-ish, it's still in my system, and it still slows me down sometimes. As a cancer survivor, I'm 7 years post my diagnosis, so chemo brain is still an active thing for me. My stoma, your body starts getting older. But I think, as we were talking about stigma and aging, I think one of the things, like for me, is like I'm always concerned about telling people I feel lonely sometimes, or I feel alone, or I feel depressed, or I just don't feel motivated. Because most people's answer is like, well, you're getting older. And I'm like, I don't think that everything that's happening in my life is because I'm getting older. There has to be some other answers. Uh, does that make sense to you? And if I were coming into your office, what would be your answer
Right.
for that?
So, and that's where we kind of come in. And it's really having them engage with the community and finding fulfilling activities. And this could mean, you know, signing up for an art class, maybe going to the gym, or, engaging with other people your age. And, even maybe teaching them tools to, find social groups, right? We also offer so many social groups. I mean, we offer anywhere from socialization, going on outings, going on a walk to the park, educational groups, to therapeutic groups, and also giving them the tools to access these, right? So, just to give you an example, there was a participant that wanted to join a biking group, and we didn't offer that, so we're like, okay, let me teach you about meetup.org, right? Or meetup.com, is it meetup.com? And teaching them how to navigate the website, and having them connect with other people, because that really is the end goal, right? um, when people are connected, they feel fulfilled and they feel like their quality of life is better. I mean, that's how we are kind of all as humans, right? We want to be connected.
I
And
think that's
that really is the
brilliant.
primary focus of our of the services that we provide. Of course, addressing the mental health and physical health and basic needs is very important. But once that is addressed, um, you know, having them find fulfilling activities would be my remedy and answer to that.
Because I think that's one of my big beliefs is allow me to be mad, be stressed, be sad. Like give me permission, give me a space to feel that. And then once we remove those feelings and emotions, then we can concentrate on the facts, like what's really going on. Does that make sense? Because I feel like as I'm getting older and being a Latino man, it's like, you should be old enough. You stop complaining, stop being a baby, and like be a man, be macho. And again, talking about the stigmas and the myths of being Latino, whatever. Um, I'm really excited that y'all take the time to focus on the person as an individual and take in those cultural norms, the social norms, and the religion behind each person to understand where they come from, so that then you can trace a good path for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because and sometimes the support group that they can start with, or are more willing to start with, is their spiritual group, maybe a church group, maybe sometimes when they're speaking of mental health without saying the words, sometimes the path of least resistance is just joining a group at their church. And and then we can talk about how just being with other people is making them feel better. And then sometimes in the year, because this program is 1 year in length. So we're working towards a goal. So sometimes once you get to the 3 or 6 months, you can start intertwining like mental health, maybe with words that are more mental health based, where at the beginning you're just talking about like going to see other people, and then you start using the word socialization, and then you start so it sometimes takes a build up to really get them to the point where they're like, I see, like, and we've had participants, and through the program, that maybe denied all mental health issues, and 6 months down, 8 months down the road, they're agreeing to see the psychiatrist that council has on board, because they've gotten to the point where they're like, you know what, I think I'm ready to talk to someone and see if there's something that I can do, because now I've been through these groups, I feel better, but I still don't feel great, and I'm ready to have the conversation about maybe medication is something I'm open to discussing.
Right, right.
So sometimes it's not just like, hey, come here, let me give you this group and mental health, because that isn't how it works. And like with most of us, it's knowing. Some people jump right on it, they're very open, they've had a therapist maybe already, and are like, absolutely, I'll join a mental health group. But that's not everyone, and so it's sometimes slow and steady.
Yeah. I definitely remember when I was first diagnosed, um, assimilation and finding, like, I thought that it was only me. I'm the only one that had these issues. So nobody's going to understand me. So why even go to therapy? Because they don't even know what I'm talking about. But then you start having conversations with other people, and maybe you don't share, but you listen, and somebody says, well, I have foggy brain after cancer. Oh, wait a minute. You do too? He's like, well, what do you do? Well, I go to my therapist. Wait, you have a therapist? Well, then I want a therapist. And then just kind of like sliding over. Um, Thank you for that. We are about 15 minutes before the end of the show. And at this point, we like to do a little bit of words of wisdom to the people listening and watching. I'm going to start with Martha. Martha, what words of wisdom do you have for the folks watching today?
Words of wisdom. Let me. I think that if I could say my words of wisdom would be to really allow yourself to kind of. I think you said to kind of really assess yourself, to really be okay with yourself, and by that I mean just like a whole person as you are. I think that when you allow yourself to understand yourself, um you can get more accomplished. And I would say, in regards to mental health, I tell a lot of my participants this is watch Inside Out. I think that,
Uh,
that movie is revolutionary and such a, to me, it's so complex in the storyline and in mental health, and in really understanding that it's okay to not be okay. But so I guess my words of wisdom would be just accept yourself, learn how to really be comfortable with yourself, and watch Inside Out.
Cool.
Inside Out. And also seek help. Mental health is something that I'm sure everyone has struggled once in their life, right? I mean, the statistics show 1 in 4 older adults suffer from some form of mental illness that has gone undiagnosed, and people are not actually seeking out the help that they may need. But just it doesn't have to be. When speaking about therapy specifically, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I am being judged by this person, or they're we have to talk about like my problems when I really don't have problems. It's just think of it as like a friend to just vent out to, right? And being able to be comfortable in your element, and sometimes letting things out feels so much better, right? um and might say is, let's reduce the stigma as a community at large and share what you're experiencing with the ones around you, so that it brings comfort and it normalizes things, right? um and absolutely.
Thank you. And I want to add my own words of wisdom to people watching out there. We
Mhm.
have gone through a couple of years of walking through life on eggshells because every time we wake up, there's something new, there's something changing. Even for those of you that live here in California, even at the end of midnight today, everybody's like, okay, we don't have to have a mask on anymore. And that for me is a form of stress. Like I didn't think I was going to have that reaction. But the moment I read the news, it was just stressful. So cut yourself a break. Give yourself a chance to break down a little bit. It's okay. You deserve it. We've all earned the opportunity to just have a little meltdown. And however you go about it, if you want to binge watch shows for the weekend, if you want to get a bunch of ice creams, or like me, order a couple of dozen tacos and try to eat them all in one night. Whatever you need to get through this, we are there to support you. And I will put the links so you can contact the agencies. But we've been through a lot and we're still going through it. And it's okay if you need a little help to just to get through it. It's okay. So don't feel like you're the only one. We're all in this together. Um, let me put up the websites. So Martha, for Radiant Health Centers for people LGBTQ, which is really the new, we're opening this new door at Radiant Health Centers, which I'm so excited about. Um, Seniors in the LGBTQ plus group, what do they need to come to seek services? What do we ask from them, etc.?
Well, for the Reconnect program, there are no requirements. Well, I shouldn't say there are no requirements. The only requirement is that they're 60 years or older and that they live in Orange County. For our specific group, we are prioritizing LGBTQ adults, but we also have a good population of HIV positive clients because that's another niche community that we are experienced with. But when we say LGBTQ, the truth is that sometimes we have had clients who maybe they themselves don't identify as LGBTQ, but their primary giver does, and so sometimes navigating some of those office visits when maybe their, trans daughter is the one taking them to appointment, and they kind of want some of that additional support. So really it extends to really anything that might impact them as an LGBTQ person, or someone who is primarily caregiven by someone who is LGBTQ. Because, again, when you're talking about just accessing health, accessing services, sometimes when your caregiver isn't being accepted, that impacts you directly as, an older adult. So yeah, 60 and over, and a resident of Orange County. There's no financial, there's nothing else. We do ask, but it really is more than anything to assess what resources we can link you to, what programming we can kind of see, and just to see, baseline, like, do we need to seek like a low cost therapist, or are you able to self-pay? So when we're asking these additional questions, it's not a matter of like we need to know for our program, but it's just, how do we give you the correct resources that you are able, because if you're low income and we have this therapist that charges $250 an hour, that's probably not going to be something long standing that you can do. So for us, that really is it. And even if Radiant Health Centers is the only agency you remember, we work with Council on Aging. We actually are like funded directly through Council on Aging. So you call us and we absolutely can link you. One of the things that we haven't mentioned is our services are in English and Spanish, but Council on Aging has a variety of other and Sarah, I'll let
Languages.
you actually go through
Yeah.
the languages. But we partner as well. We are the same program essentially. So if we have someone who is LGBTQ and a language other than Spanish, we can easily partner with a case manager so they have both cultural, linguistic, and LGBTQ support.
Cool. And I want to add before I go to Sarah, for those of you watching, I've been a client at Radiant Health Centers for the last 13 years almost. And full circle, I am now part of the board of directors, and I'm also the chair of the client advisory committee. So I trust them so much that I volunteer my time to make sure that the services needed for the community are there. Y hablo español. Así que si tienen cualquier pregunta, if you have any questions, please reach out to me in any of these. And Sarah.
Yeah, as Martha mentioned, we are the same program, and the languages culturally competent services we provide are in Korean, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Spanish, as Martha mentioned as well.
Nice. And what do people need to come and access services, or how do they come see you?
They just need to call us, right? As long as they're Orange County resident and 6 years and older, they are more than welcome to reach out to us, and we are more than happy to help them.
Excellent. So for those of you watching, hello 60. If you're already 60 years old and older, we're here to help you. Whatever part of the spectrum you are between heterosexual and homosexual, we got you. Don't speak English? No habla inglés? We got you. I feel like I'm selling cars right now. So we got you. We got something for you. Don't let stigma, shame, and silence keep you from accessing the service that you need. We all have some barriers when it comes to social norms, culture, and religion that keeps us from accessing mental health services. So if you feel and you know that you need them, access them. It's confidential. The only person that has to know is you until you're comfortable to share. And there are professionals that will guide you through it. Let me assure you, I've been in therapy for years. Am I fixed yet? No, that's why I keep going to therapy. But it helped me tremendously when I was coming out at 17. It helped me when I was diagnosed with AIDS. It helped me through cancer. It's helped me through the lockdowns. It's helped with a lot. It helped me with the loss of my mom. So we all need that little person to talk to. And I can tell you one of the benefits of having somebody that you don't know, because we all have the comadre and the coffee, and we don't talk about everything. But one of the benefits that I've had is talking to somebody that doesn't have any previous misconceptions or ideas of who I was. They're just dealing with who I am at the moment and what I need to go through. So allow them. And like I said earlier, we've been walking on eggshells for a couple of years now. Man, give yourself a break. We all need that little bit. We have about 5 minutes. Anything else before we go? Either one of you?
No, I mean, I think, one of the things is we are not the end all catch all of every service in Orange County. And I think one of the gifts or benefits to a lot of our agencies is that, we are very willing and open to collaborate. I'll touch base, I think earlier on we had a question about Alzheimer's. Radiant Health Centers is partnering, I should say, with Alzheimer's Association to provide LGBTQ webinars for both clients and other agencies so that they are aware. We work with the LGBTQ Center OC. They have some groups that are for older adults that are LGBTQ identified. Radiant has some of those support. We work with Shanti OC. They provide some mental health groups and support for LGBTQ people. So, the reality is that, there is not one agency in the county or even in the world that can do everything. So knowing that the place you are going is willing to kind of self-reflect and say, we are not the specialists. We ourselves, like I said, LGBTQ health, HIV health, we can say that we are very skilled, but the truth is that we still need a lot of support and resources from Council on Aging. And there's been very many times where we have a participant that we reach out and we consult with Sarah or some of the other team to make sure that we're getting them the right resources, with housing, with medical care, with supportive services, caregiver services. So, I think when you have an agency that's willing to say, like, we don't know it all, I think that's when you really are able to say, I'm in a good place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and for those of you, I have received services from different agencies throughout the last 13 years that I lived in Orange County. So I can attest to that. Sarah, any last thoughts before we go?
Yeah, no, I just want to mention that the most important part, that this is at no cost. It is completely free to you. So if you know of anybody or yourself needing the support, please feel free to reach out to us.
Let me just put up the websites again before we go. And remind everybody that if you have any more questions, whatever channel you're watching us, send us a private message and I will make sure I give you the correct information or refer you to the right people. Martha and Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much.
Sarah, you did amazing for your first time. Bravo. Yes, bravo. I'm going to put y'all in the green room for just a second while I say goodbye. Don't go anywhere so I can say goodbye to y'all. Give me just 1 second. For everybody watching, thank you for watching. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, please do us a favor. Share this on your page so that others can watch it. If you're watching us on YouTube, scroll down, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. It'll let you know whenever new shows are up on the air. Remember that we have several shows throughout the week. You can catch on Wednesdays, the Christian and Daniel show. On Fridays, the Card Debo. And on Saturdays, Put It Together. But we throw special shows every once in a while. So make sure that you are connected to us on YouTube. Check us out at littlemexicanproductions.com. # Little Mexican Productions Inc. And for now, I want to just thank all of you for being here. Thank you. I hope this helps in any way. Share it with your friends, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.